Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and today I have two card projects for you. I am featuring the new 4 Petals release from Spellbinders. This is so pretty. First we have the Scroll Punch and Pierce plate. It's an A2 size plate and it cuts out 3 pieces from your A2 panel with all that lovely detail. Then we have the 4 Petals Bloom reflection dies. This one has this large piece that cuts out like the background leaves, and then we have all the layering flower pieces. I taped mine together, so I'm cutting out all of the flowers out of the same color, and I'll just cut it out twice. There's also this Thanks Enclosed. It has 42 dies with a ton of greetings. I'm not using this one today, but I have a video coming out tomorrow that is, so stay tuned for that one. I cut out that punch and pierce plate and we're just going to use the largest piece of it on the background of our card. I also cut out the background leaves piece, the arrangement, 4 times, twice from a matte silver and twice from a heavyweight white cardstock. And then I cut all of the layering flower pieces out, once from a matte silver and once from a matte gold. We actually are only going to use one of those large floral pieces on this first card. I'm taking a piece of dark teal cardstock and I am going to ink blend around the edges. The silver cardstock is going to cover up a lot of that, so I'm not even worried too much about it, right? I'm going kind of quickly, a little bit messy. It's fine. Plus, these are Altenew inks. If you haven't used them, there is something magic about them. I don't know what it is. This looks super splotchy, and that's often how mine look at first. And part of that is that the ink is wet, but when that dries, it just smooths out beautifully. You do not need to be a master at ink blending to come up with something that looks really, really gorgeous. So I'm coming in with a second color. It's the same shade or the same color, but a darker shade. And that is my background panel. I've come in just far enough that it will peek out from behind that silver cardstock. Next, I'm going to glue together one of my heavyweight white pieces with one of my matte silver pieces. The silver I'm using, I'm trying to get through my stash, is like a really flimsy, old, it's like I thought it would never go on sale again. So I bought lots of it and I'm going to layer those up. I am assembling 2 of them here, but we're actually only going to use one of them on this first card, and then we'll use a second one on card number 2. I'm using Accent Opaque 120 pound as my heavyweight white. It's been out of stock a lot, but it was in stock this morning when I checked. I get it on Amazon. It's like $13 for 150 pieces. It's bananas. So maybe check on that. I'll link it below to help you find it. They have lots of different weights in that brand. So worth looking at. It's really inexpensive and a great heavyweight cardstock. I'm now performing surgery on my background floral. I am trimming first around the center 4 blooms, okay? So I am cutting pieces off of the flowers themselves and not worrying too much about it. But when I get to the leaves, I'm being very careful to try to keep the shape of the leaf intact. You're going to see that it is going to be that silver cardstock. But when it comes to the blooms, we are layering all kinds of pieces on top of them. So if I have to take a tiny chunk out of a flower to preserve a leaf, that's okay. The leaf is more important here. So this is our first piece. Next, I'm going to separate this little flower and leaf from the larger flower, sort of viney leaf. And I'm just going to take that other piece right off the side of it there. We'll save him for later. So again, I'm coming around and I'm just cleaning up around those leaves, trying to make sure that they look intact. This is why I cut 2 of them to start with. I wasn't sure if I would be able to preserve both the blooms and the leaves as I started cutting things apart. The first time I did this, it was a hot mess. So right here, I'm just rounding the edge. That kind of leads into the other flower leaf combo, and you can't even tell. That piece is going to be on the second card as well, and I love it. This is so versatile. This is maybe the second set that Spellbinders has come out with like this. I'm not great at arranging florals. I can do it, but it takes me an hour because I sit there and I futz with it, and I'm just not sure if it looks good or not. So these really give us a quick and easy way to put some beautiful flowers on a card. That shape that's in the background of the scroll and pierce plate, there is also in this collection a set of nesting dies in that same shape. And the largest of them is the perfect size to put 2 of these floral arrangements and then a sentiment right in the middle. It's beautiful. I will link to Spellbinders website below if you want to see examples of how that comes together. I don't have those nesting dies. And so I was really trying to figure out, how do I use this in a way that is still really beautiful? You guys, I love these cards. So I hope you do too. Let me know. These are all of my pieces. I cut off very little that got thrown out. I'm going to now assemble the blooms themselves. So you can see for this large flower, there are 4 pieces. So I'm going to add my silver piece here, and then there's one where all of the little circles are punched out. On the next one, I'm not going to do it quite like that. I'm going to put the solid piece back behind the bloom, so I don't need to layer quite so many pieces. Yes, there are lots of little pieces. I like assembling these. I think it's kind of fun, and I think the effect is stunning. It's so worth it. If you haven't done something like this before, give it a try. A set like this is really great for it because you know exactly where everything is supposed to go. And you don't have to add all the layers. Like these little fan-shaped flowers, they look beautiful just in that gold cardstock. I am going to add all the layers to show you what it looks like, and because I think it's pretty. So there's a little piece down at the bottom, and then I wasn't even sure what this piece was for at first, but it goes right along the edges at the top and finishes off that flower. I started assembling these using my Barely Art glue because I love the fine tip bottle for this, but Barely Art, it'll work, but it doesn't grab very quickly. And because the cardstock is a little shiny, that proved to be sort of challenging. So I used it certainly like on the fan flowers and the really skinny little pieces, but I have switched. I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive for a bunch of these. It just grabs onto non-porous surfaces like this shiny cardstock a little bit faster. So I'm less likely to bump something with my hand and knock it askew before it's really dried. When I'm assembling something like this, I set out all the pieces that I need and kind of assembly line style, put everything together. It's a little faster for me. It goes faster still when all of this is still put together, because then I can start adding glue to multiple flowers at the same time. So kind of like here, I have these 3 flowers that are pretty much the same shape. I don't have to think too much about this. I'm listening to a book. Are you guys readers? I'm in the middle of, well, towards the end actually. I'm listening to the Dresden Files for the 3rd time. And I'm in the middle of Ghost Story. So I'm listening to a book. I'm assembling die cuts. I'm kind of proud of myself for not having to cut this whole thing apart twice. So I have my 3 flowers there, and now that's all my pieces. I can start assembling my card base. You can see this is starting to smooth out a little bit, and I'm just adding that to my A2 top folding card, and then I'm going to add our scroll punch and pierce plate. I'm not too worried about adding glue in every little nook and cranny of this, right? I'm just going for the edges to create a good seal, nothing that's going to catch on my envelope as I'm pulling it in and out. And then that covers up a lot of that blend and leaves just a hint of a shadow coming through to the center, just a little bit to add some interest. Next, I'm going to hot foil a sentiment. This is from the Mini Everyday Sentiments. I am pretty new to hot foiling. You can see I foiled Happy Birthday, but it didn't come out as crisply as I wanted. I hadn't foiled on this cardstock before, and I'm pretty new to foiling. So I ran it back through again with just a piece of copy paper as a shim, and it came out beautifully. I have just the tiniest little bit of overfoiling, so I'll use my mono sand eraser to remove that. I love that this set of hot foil plates comes with 3 dies to cut out the sentiments. I'm so new to this, you guys, so if you have tips for hot foiling for me, I can't get a sentiment to foil straight to save my soul. So having dies to cut that out is huge. I then decided to trim off the little flags on the end, so I'm covering up less of the flowers, and I've cut some extra pieces of cardstock to put behind that. There's a lot of dimension on that background because of those flowers, and so this just makes it extra sturdy. So if I stick this in the mail, it's not going to crush that sentiment, and it's not going to end up, you know, sunken down in the middle and sticking up on the ends. I've kind of arranged my flowers where I think I want them, and I'm going to start gluing them down, and apparently I'm going to make a huge mess with my glue. It dried okay. I was like panicking that it would look weird, and you'd be able to see that glue even after I wiped it off, but no, it worked out just fine. I am sticking these 2 pieces down at the bottom and the large one at the top first, because I want to be able to move those flowers in the middle just in case. I want to get them set up exactly where they need to be, and this left me a little more wiggle room. Even though I am covering up part of that center flower, I think it makes a big difference. Like you can still see that flower kind of peeking out. And when I go to attach the ones on the side, I'm just trying to make sure that they're spaced evenly, so it's nice and symmetrical. I've added the sentiment with my tweezers here, so my fingers aren't quite in the way, and I can see everything pretty well. I used my Barely Art glue here at first. I went back later with the Nuvo because I knocked it with my hand and it started wiggling around on the shiny cardstock. So I highly recommend the Nuvo. It's sometimes hard to find, but it's been in stock lately at scrapbook.com. I will try to link that below. So this is card project number 2. This is a bonus card. I didn't start filming thinking I was gonna make this card, but I'm trying to be brave. I'm trying to branch out of my very safe die cutting world and make cards with techniques that are new for me. And so I had an extra panel that I had ink blended ahead of time. I did that the exact same way as the first card, because I was trying to figure out how I wanted to make the first card. So mostly I'm using extra pieces, and I am hot foiling this diagonal stripes. I've never used this plate before. I've never foiled anything this big before, and it turned out surprisingly well. I have just a little bit of overfoiling on the corners. I was worried that it wouldn't come off very well, or that I would ruin the ink blend when I went to sand that off, and it didn't. The ink had soaked into the paper far enough that it still looks pretty good there. I am going to walk you through very quickly, right? I've edited this one a whole bunch. The assembly of this large floral piece all together. I think it's useful to see what this looks like when you haven't cut the whole thing apart, and it's stunning. There's a whole bunch of footage I cut out where I was trying to figure out how to save this piece, how to put this piece on the card as well. In the end, also trying to be brave, I pulled back. I'm a more is more card maker. If you've watched my videos for any length of time, you know that. And so to have a card like this one that ends up actually pretty sparse is unusual. And so that was part of my being brave as well. When the whole thing is still together, this is pretty quick, right? I add 5 dots of glue, and then I add the 5 centers. And then I add 2 dots of glue, and I add the 2 bases to these fan flowers. Because everything is all connected, I was able to put the whole thing together in, it was 7 or 8 minutes. I've sped it up here and I've cut out all the pieces because you've kind of seen this. But really, if the focal point of your card is taking you 10 minutes, That's not long at all for me anyway. A lot of times when I'm making a card, you're getting the ideally like a 10-minute video, but it took me 5 hours to plan it and get everything kind of ready to film. So please know these arrangements from Spellbinders, I can't say it enough, just make everything so much easier, so much faster. If I had not decided to cut the whole thing apart and just use this, that would have been a pretty quick and easy card. I still have more pieces left over. I never used this piece that I put together. So I have another card that I will be making probably off camera with the leftover pieces. So I tried to hot foil Happy Birthday in between the diagonal lines, and it moved and it wasn't straight. And I was like, I'm not throwing it out. I've come this far. So I'm going to foil that sentiment again on some dark navy cardstock. And I'm going to start by taping down my glitter, and the navy cardstock I have lined up just perfectly on my grid mat. So this white piece of cardstock is really just there to create a straight edge for my sentiment. So I'm kind of butting that right up against the cardstock, and then I will tape it down, covering the foil and the navy cardstock. I don't have a die that fits this one, so it's easier for me if it's foiled straight onto the cardstock and then to try to cut it out and get it straight than it is to try to eyeball it and get it straight with my trimmer. So I'm using the finger guard on the right for that first cut to figure out like how much to leave intact at the top of that sentiment. And now I'm lining that white cardstock up just as a visual guide so I can try to get the top margin and the bottom margin equal. And it worked out pretty well. I have added a few extra pieces of cardstock. I just cut up the rest of that navy piece. And I'm going to add them behind here to create a little bit of dimension. And then I'm using some removable adhesive, and I'm going to lay the sentiment right on there. I know that visually I have a hard time centering things diagonally. So I'm bringing in some white cardstock just to show me like how much of a margin is before the H and after the Y, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to come in with my scissors. I maybe should have used my trimmer. There's enough layers here that this was a little tricky. But I'm going to come in with my scissors and trim that so I know exactly what size I need. And then I will add glue to the back and just line that right back up. And I know I have my sentiment centered on my card. From here, I did a bunch of playing around. I want to know if you see an arrangement that you really like that I didn't use. So I'm bringing in that large piece and kind of moving it into different places. But as soon as I bring in these small ones, I'm like, yes, that is beautiful. That's what I really want on this card. So then I'm trying to figure out if I can keep that larger piece. If I'd cut this down to a square card, I think it would have been really lovely to have these smaller pieces on the bottom and then the large floral above the sentiment. I mean, that's kind of how this was designed, was for the large floral to sort of have a sentiment in between two of those pieces. I'm going to take one of these small flowers that also has some of the vines still on it, and I'm going to trim it out because it fits just perfectly right in the middle there. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do to this. So this is just a card front. I'm going to add this to a top folding A2 card. I thought about adding it to a white one, but something about the richness of these colors, I really didn't want to interrupt that with like a stark white card for the base. So that's it. I didn't add any sequins or any bling. Let me know in the comments below which of these two cards you like the most. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.